I'm going to come back and revisit this well that I showed a few minutes ago, and I want to show you an idea that we came up with to take something, what they used to say, well, they used to say things like put lipstick on a pig, but this is more like making lemonade out of lemons, because we took a play that just didn't work, and based on some really, I think, good science, we started an entirely new play. And it's not being talked about because the companies involved aren't very public about it. So I'm going to show you some stuff here and things that we did just a few years ago, and give you an idea of maybe how you can use geochemistry or any other associated tool that you might have to come up with another idea. Just thinking out of the box, if you will. So I put this slide in here because I take so much crap for the word eaglebine, and yet we have things like wolfberry, wolfbone. We call the trend consolidated eaglebine. That's ours. Buda rose. We'll talk a little bit about that. El halcón. That's another word for the eagleford. And then at the bottom, I said, well, if we're going to get wild, let's just call something cheaglebine and combine the chalk and the eagleford and the woodbine all together. And really, guys, these are not geologic formation names. They're really marketing names, if you will, because now eaglebine's a word out there, and it's hard to claw that back and say it's woodbine. But what I wanted to make a point of is, they used to say, all of us young geologists were told the best place to find oil is in an oil field, which is why I talked about the chalk. But if you can't be in an oil field, at least combine enough names together to make something that people want to reference, right? So a little bit of eagleford and a little bit of unknown woodbine, or a little bit of chalk and a little bit of eagleford, and there you go, cheagleford, cheaglebine, whatever you want to call it. So it's not geologic, it's strictly for the money guys, I guess. But eaglebine has come up with a word. We started that back when I was a consultant with Hess and with Zaza. We coined it because we were trying to sell it to Hess, and we wanted Hess to buy into it, and it wasn't eagleford. We knew it wasn't eagleford. Their geochemists knew it wasn't eagleford. It was woodbine. But woodbine's wasn't a term that was used in the marketplace. And then Zaza became public, and of course that was a very interesting long story that I hope I never have to tell. And if somebody wants to hear about it, I won't tell, especially the SEC. So back to this well. So this is back to this well in this anomalous section. And this under mature area. I think I said earlier it's overpressured. It's got light hydrocarbons in it. It's still got liquids. Even though it should be gas, it actually produces oil, which is another thing when you say, hey, the vitrite reflectance is getting up over 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Hey, what's going on? And then you come back and say, well, but there's still oil locked in that system. That's how tight this rock is. And then on top of that, it was very, very high clay content. Now I can tell you, drilling through that section, you can drill through it relatively easy at 10 pound tube mud most of the time. If you stop to log, you might lose that wellbore. If you stop to take sidewall cores, you're probably going to lose that wellbore. And it's not because of the swelling clays. A lot of our guys like the term swelling clays. These clays don't swell. I've got a bag of those. I should have brought them down. A bag of rocks from this well. A bag of samples that are as big around as my fist. This goes back to a shale play long before we had shale play. So if anybody worked with the Rockies and ever heard of the steel shale, Amoco was a minor player up there, and a lot of vertical drillers would drill through the steel shale, and it would start to unravel. Much like we found in the overthrust, we found a lot of the shales in the Watchtower, the same thing. They're so overpressured, they basically, when you drill through them, it's like a shale with the bends. It's like a scuba diver coming up too soon. The gas expands and the rocks start to implode. It's like you pull your core too fast and it comes out poker chips. It just decompressed. Well, the same thing happened here. Once you drill into this section, it's so overpressured, it starts to unravel. Pretty soon you could park a school bus down there, maybe 2 or 3 school buses, right?
50% casing and then drilling
Absolutely, that's what we did. Ultimately, you're right. The solution to it, and I'll show you, the guy just right ahead of me there. Perfect question. We did, but everybody wants a shallow log, right? So now you're playing the game of can I get it, can I not get it? If you go out to Walker County, Madison County, go out into San Jacinto, a lot of those wells don't have shallow logs. They have cased hole neutron, cased hole gamma rays, because they set casing immediately and ran. So it varies. So this is a very anomalous section. So now how do I make this into a play? What do I do? So I put some deals, I always go back, I said, so we're talking about, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Lower Cretaceous, and that's the Buda Rose play, but I want to talk about the Eaglebine play, and the Eaglebine play being a little bit of very little bit of Eagleford, a lot of Woodbine, in amongst a lot of delta sections, Woodbine sands, Harris Delta, things like that. And then some people have a little Manus shale down there. That Manus shale is really after a well drilled, 200 miles north, an old Shell Manus well, and it's a little low resistivity shale right at the top of the Buda, right above the false Buda, if you will. So again, we divided the play. This is an old slide. I pulled it back because I wanted people to think about it. Is we broke the play up into different types of plays. Really, everybody thinks of the Eagleford play in blue. Then we had the purple play to the north, which we thought would be a great play. That's mostly Woodbine sand silt play. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I actually showed a log in all the way north in Wood County to some guys in Tyler and showed the potential of the same shale section way north, deeper, but way north, another kind of concept play. And then the golden play is what we call the Eaglebine play, and we kind of merged that and said, well, it runs along the front. It's not really Eagleford, it's more Woodbine, and then kind of blends into Tuscaloosa Marine Shale as you go further on over. And I think we all can pretty much think that that place failed. I don't think there's anybody in the room still thinking that we're going to make the Eaglebine within certain areas, but most of it's just got an issue. I'll tell you why. So here's one of this is a mud log, actually two mud logs, two different wells, one a modern log, one an old log. This is the well here, this well on this side here. We got it out of a guy drilled that with RME Anadarko. We got that log out of his garage in Louisiana. We flew down there. He had one of the only mud logs on that well. It's an old Anadarko. The RME was bought by Anadarko. Some of the wells were drilled under RME. It's the old Glen Rose Mossy Grove field. And they drilled through this section, never got logs most of the time. Drill down, drill into the Glen Rose, and then they would drill single lateral, dual lateral, and then they would drill until they got stuck and cut off the casing and then run in and perforate it and produce the Glen Rose. And get these big units again. But bottom line, you drill through. So the Buda's right down there at the very base of that, a little bit of false Buda in the Buda. And look at the mud log shows. Now, see this mud log show? And that's got a gas chromatograph. It actually has oil in it. C1 through C3. It's pretty impressive. Modern log on the other side, again, if you're thinking about this, the top part, there's your Austin Chalk. Here's your little bit of Eagleford, if there is any, and then you have Harris Delta, which in this area is about 400 foot thick. And then you come out into this long shale section, and you go to your false Buda, then eventually your Buda. And again, right above the Buda is the gas shows. That's the section we were after. Has anybody ever heard of having too little of shale in a play? Remember the days when we were in the Barnett? If you don't have 200 foot of shale, it's not going to work. We had a cutoff. Had to be a certain thickness. On the other side of that coin is, have we ever thought about having too much shale? I mean, we're drilling these sections now. That's 1,000 feet from the chalk to the top of the Buda. 1,000 feet. In some areas, it's entirely shale. We never think about too much shale. Let's think about it. Now, I want to show you the mud log going deeper because this ribeye well, actually, these were all named after tenderloin steaks, ribeye, things like that. I thought it was fun because I always like to name prospects after something fun, not something they can use to kill you with, like a tomahawk or axe, right? So this one is you drill down through right through the Georgetown, through the Buda, through the George. So this log just takes off and goes below. Then you go through the Kainichi Shale. Now, in this little part of what we call the Brazos Subbasin, which isn't really well talked about, but the Kainichi Shale here is about 100 foot thick. Most places, the Kymeta shale is like 10 foot thick, and it's reported to have sourced most of what we call the Edwards. Here we have kind of a mixture of Edwards and Goodland. Different people call it differently. I can tell you that the rattier that section gets, the more shows you have, and we've cored it all the way from the base of Georgetown all the way down into Glen Rose. And when you're away from any of these carbonate buildups, you've got a lot of potential. But you have to think about it when we talk about this plate in a few minutes. Then you drill out into the Paluxy Shale. Again, notice all the shows. The shows are only in the shales. They say, well, that's because there's porosity in the carbonates and they're washed clean. No, these shales don't give up their hydrocarbons as readily as you'd like to think. And besides that, if you perforate one of those carbonates, you might just see the ocean. So there's a guy I won't speak of in Madison County, drilled 3 wells, did not run logs. He just perforated off a mud log. I'm only going to perforate where the shows are. And actually did quite well. If we come in here, look at conventional log analysis, conventional type work, and we always run home to something we're familiar with. Hey, there's a little bit of a sand. Let's run home to the sand. A little bit of carbonate. Let's go to the carbonate. Conventional reservoirs. When you're thinking of unconventional, you're not thinking about the thing. Where's the oil stored? The oil's still stored there. Go for the shales. That's a big concept. So let's go back here now, back to this well log. And what I said before was literally from 1,000 to 5,000 feet, the sediments are immature for oil generation. So the Wilcox in this area is not mature. This is a Wilcox coal, is not mature. The Wilcox section is under mature. In this part of the basin, you'd never think that would happen. Then from 5,000 to 11,500 feet, you kind of get in your main phase oil generation, but not really. And then from 12 to 12.7, that's 700 feet, the source rocks are in late phase oil and actually early gas condensate gas. That's just, when you go back and look at that, that's what this section shows. Under mature, starting to get mature, right there, and then, wow, takes off. I mean, literally, and there's a lot of arguments about this because when the first geochemist looked at this data, he basically went back and changed his numbers to make it a straight line because he didn't believe his own Vegemite reflectance. He said, I just can't, that just doesn't work, right? And you say, no, wait a minute, but that's the real numbers. Maybe there's a reason for it. So when you look at this, all the setups between 8,000 and 11,500, they didn't really show an increase in Vegemite reflectance, which really starts to begin when you have samples that go straight down and you don't get more Vegemite reflectance, you have another key. That key being pressure. You're getting close to pressure. That's a key. Overpressure. Way overpressure. So there's a few other things in here. That kink is a real important part. So when you come back up here and you look at this kink right here at the base, you see it just jump all the way over. Again, you would almost think your samples were something was wrong with your Vegemite reflectance samples. Now there's 2 papers. I referenced the bottom. Law wrote a paper in 1985, and Dr. Mukapade, who actually did work here in 1992, both of them talking about this effect, but nobody talks about it in the U.S. So you have something that's anomalous. You have effects of it. We saw the awesome chalk probably under mature, not mature enough to generate hydrocarbons. And then you have a shale that's right to hearts. Let's go after this Woodbine shale, Eagle Mine. So here I put up a rocky valve pyrolysis, shows you the same kind of thing. This actually says rock, and this is a pseudo Van Kelvin. It shows these generations. A lot of these samples that we took down here are moving in. They're definitely in the gas window. So when you're looking for oil, which we're all looking for oil today, we're not looking for gas, and you look at these samples, you're going to say you're going to get gas out of this well, and yet we produced oil out of this well. Another thing, again, this leads you one direction. That does show you a little bit about the marine, it's deep water, things like that, but it does show you, again, it's in the gas window. So, look at 3 wells. I actually produced oil out of them. Now, unfortunately, I lined the samples up backwards when I snapped the picture, but you can almost visually look at these and tell me which ones are where. And I put a depth map on here. So the first sample is from this McAdams well. It's a Buda well, horizontal Buda well. We'll talk about that. The next sample is then from the Josie whales. We were into country western guys like John Wayne, Josie whales, and you can see that McAdams Cattle Company. That was actually the name of the ranch. And True Grit, of course, everybody knows John Wayne, right? All right, so then John Wayne, True Grit is further down dip. So you go from a dark sample to a little bit lighter sample to a lighter sample. They look different, but when you fingerprint them, it's all the oil at a little different maturation just based on depth. 2 of those samples are from the Buda. 1 of those samples is from the Woodbine, and yet they're all the same. So we talked about the Eagle Ford maybe sourcing the chalk, or maybe not. Now, could the Buda be sourced by the Woodbine? Interesting. It's a great concept. So when you compare the shales to Eagle Ford, to the Tuscaloosa Machine, to this Eaglebine, you're looking at just about the same kind of shale, except that it's much, much thicker. Both the Tuscaloosa and, of course, the Eaglebine. Both of them are the thickest we've ever dealt with. We haven't really been dealing with a lot of thick shales. But when you look at things that really people look at silica content is higher here than in the Eagle Ford. But the reverse side of that, your clay content is higher. And then what really scared people off was the carbonate content was lower. When we were fracking the Eagle Ford, we were fracking the carbonates because it would maintain a frac. You could drill it, and you could frack it, and it would hold those perf tunnels open long enough so you prop them open, and then you could keep them open forever in the carbonate. If you take the Eagle Ford wells like in Gonzales County and you go into the upper part low resistivity, the lower part's low resistivity, if you drill in that, you're going to get stuck. It's high TOC content, has no carbonate, and it doesn't maintain a stable borehole. So go for the carbonate. Everybody did. When you lose the carbonate, and as you come into Lavaca County, it's like the carbonate's gone from there all the way over. We made it work in Brazos. They're making it work. Wild Horses making it work in Burleson, Brazos counties, things like that. You see it. You can make it work. But when you lose it, everybody takes a step back because it doesn't look like the one I just saw. If you go back to the Barnett and you look at the first wells drilled up in Denton and Wise County, 3,000 ohm resistivity. And then Chevron comes down to Johnson County, drills a well, vertical well, and they have 300 ohms resistivity. They walked away from that play because it wasn't like the wells to north. Of course, think about it, if you guys do a Barnett, Johnson County became a real play for a lot of reasons for Eugene and others because they knew it still had hydrocarbons in it. But you always look at analogies in this industry, and this is one of them. And so the Eaglebine, if we wouldn't have put the word eagle in front of this, we would have never even drilled a well out here. If it didn't have something related to Eagle Ford, you would never have done it because it had been Woodbine silty. I don't care what the silica content is, it doesn't have any carbonate in it, it's low resistivity, it's got to be silty. You can just think about all the things that they say to you all the time. They beat you to death, and finally you say, I'm not going to drill this well. But bottom line, we did anyway. So here's a comparison of just taking El Halcon, which was again a good marketing term for Halcon, and look at the cores. I mean, if you look at those cores from here, that looks like a great shale, right? Good shales all the way up the section. Same thing with here. And if you look at the distribution of silica and clay content, they're very, very, very similar. But El Halcon seemed to be a much better word for drilling, and it's just maintained a good play around College Station, but very similar rocks. Okay, so if I'm living in the fantasy world, I've talked to you guys about Austin Chalk, talked to you a little bit about the sand section. So here's a log, here's that 1,000-foot of shale section, 1,000-foot of shale section marked out there from the base of the chalk, a little bit of Harris Delta. And I look at all the shows I had all the way down. I've showed you guys all these shows on these mud logs, right? And I start thinking, wow, thinking way out of the box. And I think, hey, I can make this a vertical play. I could make it a horizontal play. I could make it a lot of horizontal plays. I could drill horizontal Buda, it's got shows. I could drill horizontal Eaglebine or Woodbine. I could drill Austin Chalk. I could drill the upper part because it's got shows too. I could drill the Kaimichi, the Paluxy, and anything in between. I can dream up all kinds of things. This actually slide came from a presentation of a public company saying, hey, guys, we can frack everything. The ones that show frack, some of these are naturally, have natural porosity, but look at the optionality here. Well, let's look at the results. So I pulled 3 wells. Let's look at this one up here on the upper right-hand side. That first well drilled out here, 2011, drilled by Range. Okay, they drilled it well. Drilled the Eagle Bind, ran casing, plugged and perfed it, and then lost the wellbore. Mechanical junk and abandoned. What happened? After they drilled that well and fracked it, there's so much pressure, so much shell. You can drill it. Mind you, when you make the curve, you're drilling 16-pound mud. As long as you don't have anything that breaks down on you, they actually sidetracked this 3 times, ran casing 3 different times to get it drilled out because of the pressure. And with those Woodbine sands open above you, if you go to 16-pound mud below you, you're going to lose it above you. Well, I don't care if you lose it in the Woodbine or lose it in the chalk, so you said casing. And they set it casing again, and then they set it a 3rd time and drilled it out. Plugged and perfed it, and then they got back in to drill the plugs out, 1,000 foot of overpressure shale, and the wellbore has started to move. And it's no longer a circle. You can't drill through it. You can't get in and drill your plugs out. Range kept after it. You know, the drilling engineers give them a task and a lot of money. And they end up breaching the casing, drilled right out into the shale. So that jumped in a bannock. It still produces a little bit of oil. So then we come in, voila, we come in as partnered with Range, the Zaza, and now we drill the Stingray well. We were naming them after fish at this time, and college students, but that's a co-eds. But no, we're after mascots, so I'm sorry. We drilled the Commodore and a few things like that. But so here the Stingray, we drilled the Stingray. Again, we drill it, mud up to 16-pound mud, run casing, get all the way out to a lateral, plug and perfect. They're great shows, great, everything went fine. And then the casing part. I've got a high resolution, what do we call it? We ran a tool in there to measure the actual diameter of the tool at high resolution. And when the casing parted, it acted like an accordion. And you couldn't drill the plugs out. We ended up getting stuck, jumped in the bottom of the well. Produced a little bit of oil, so we tested that oil too. And then now we're broke. So who do we go to? We go to UG. We go to UG. Hey guys, come on in. Let's show you a great play. Range is involved. We're involved. It's great. Got all these upside opportunities, all this data. Let's go drill the True Grit 1H. We drilled the pilot well, which I showed, and now we drill this one. What happens? EUG, with all their might and power, drills a great lateral. Great completion. Couldn't drill the plugs out. 3 wells, all drilled, same target, all had basically the same issue. So now the play's dead, right? Think about it. You got 3 relatively astute companies and nowhere to go. How do you get this out of here? So we had a retreat. Now I will tell you, in the process of working with EUG out here, because we drill a lot of vertical wells and horizontal wells, we tested 82 different zones out here. 82 different zones. We knew everything about everything, but we couldn't figure out what to do here. Then somebody came up with the idea. Well, I put this at the bottom. I like to put these little things in there. It says, I don't know if you guys remember the old proverb. We always think about if you don't learn, try again. And so if at first you don't succeed, try again. We're not in that industry. There's a point, you almost have to let another generation of oil and gas finders go until nobody remembers about it before you come back in and do it again. And we're getting pretty old, guys, so it's not like we can just do this. It means the young guys might be able to last through these and come back in 30 years, but the rest of us are not in that situation. So what we did, we took all the vertical wells, because there was a play going on out here to the north of us called the Buda Rose play. Again, combination of Buda and Glen Rose. A section all the way down. They went and got a Rule 7 from the Railroad Commission, which allowed them to commingle all of those different formations. Buda, the Georgetown, the Kiamichi, the Goodland, Edwards, all the way down Paluxy, all the way down to the Glen Rose. It's under a rule that says if you can't make any one formation economic, you can commingle formations to make them economic. It's kind of like I was combining words. Chiegelbein, you know, like we'll just take the chalk and the Eaglebine and the wood, we'll just keep adding them together and perforate the whole thing vertically. So this made a pretty good play because these wells out here, really, I showed some of the IPs of there, 657 barrels a day, 539 barrels a day. Again, perforate over that entire section. So perforate it and then frack the shales. So stack the pays. So, you know, it gave us enough idea that, hey, look, the Buda, so we cored the Buda. So here's a core. Here's a core in the Buda. That looks like an extremely fractured or potentially a failure in coring. What we noticed was that the oils in the Buda and the oils in the Woodbine were the same. We also noticed that high pressure in the Woodbine bled into the Buda. So you had a failed seal. You didn't have a seal. So what do? We can't drill in the shale. We can, but we failed so many times we want to do it again. I mean, let's face it. How do we get to the shale above us? The concept was then drill the Buda and frack into the shale and get the hydrocarbons out. Now, if I drill a Buda well, right, and it's naturally fractured, I'll produce it. If it's tight, I'll just use an oriented perforating gun. Perforate, not quite straight up, I mean, it's usually at about a 30-degree phase, but frack up into it. Kind of like you would do the, I don't know, the Bakken. Great example of drilling the middle section and fracking up and down. Same thing here. So we took this data, all of this assimilated information, and we started the horizontal Buda play. And now I'll just show you an example. So here's a mud log. You drill through this thing, and I drilled through it. Actually, I drilled this well, 9.5-pound mud. Then I turn and drill at horizontal, and I start at 10.2, and I end up at 16.2. But again, that's a failure. That's actually the stingray. So here's what we came up with. This is our concept idea. This is what we kind of worked with everybody. So what you have here is you have a couple of things going on. So that is that stingray wellbore. And so what you have is usually we think of horizontal pressure, we think of the mud cake, or the mud trying to keep the well from caving in on you as you drill it. So we have lots of ways of taking care of that. What we learned was once we got in the wellbore, now you have two things going on. You have overburden pressure crushing you, but then you have degassing going on. That formation is now degassing and starting to implode. Like I said, it's not swelling. You can put these rock samples in any solution you want to, and it'll be a rock sample a month from now. It starts to cavitate. That's the steel shale. Cavitates, the word we use. You think of it from Hunt for Red October, when he turns the submarine too fast in the back of the propeller, it creates a sound wave. Same thing, cavitating, right? So what we found was there was a magical angle. You could drill up to 65 degrees normally pressured. Beyond 65 degrees, it's a different story. Now, do you think we were brilliant? Probably not, because they learned this back when they were drilling Buda wells in Giddings. They knew they could drill it to 65 degrees before it became unstable. So you got a magical point there. So the solution then was to take it and do a little bit. So I put this in here. So what happens is when you drill that, you've got all kinds of issues going. Lateral collapsing, collapsed casings, casing failures. You can't drill the plugs out. You drill out a zone. All kinds of things. All kinds of geological hazards, including faults. A lot of things that affect us in all the shale plays. Bottom line, there's our solution. So this one we started with one of the new wells. We set casing, usually through the chalk. We drilled to 65 degrees right here. And then, where's that 65 degrees? Right in the top of the Buda. Just exactly what you said. Drill in the top of the Buda. Now you land it in the Buda at 65 degrees. The Buda's 50 foot thick. You can't turn it. So what you end up doing is you end up with this little gooseneck in it. You actually drill through the Del Rio clay into the top of the Georgetown, and then you try to come back up and predict the Buda and land in the Buda, which is 50 foot thick. It's a bit of a chore, but it's possible. So and then you take it and you take the Buda section and you frack up into the Woodbine, and voila, you got a play going down. Now it's a successful play. So we've taken all that data, some of it not necessarily in foresight, a lot of it in hindsight, which is much better than foresight, but it started the horizontal Buda play. So here's an example of, this is one that UG drills, the Vic well, and you can see the gooseneck. This is as drilled down the lateral, and it almost looks like they came in and out of the Buda. They actually drilled out into the shale a couple of times, had to back up and sidetrack. So that 50-foot section is a little bit difficult to drill. But just to give you an idea, and I pulled this production last night just to update it, that well's made 332,000 barrels of oil and 2.6 BCF of gas. I think that's a successful play, right? Maybe 2.7 BOE. Maybe not. That's maybe pushing the envelope, because this area does have that bubble point depth issue. But I think that EUG's made it work. We weren't involved in a lot of parts of the play, but they've gone out since then and drilled a lot of horizontal Buda wells. At the same time, they've drilled horizontal Georgetown wells, horizontal Kaimichi wells, horizontal Glen Rose wells, looking at all that section. It's all potential. So we took something that didn't work, we thought about it long enough, and convinced ourselves to do this, and then we started drilling the Josie wells and a bunch of other wells down up here. It goes on and on. And it comes back down to understanding that section. So this goes back a little bit, step back a little bit. Remember, for the guys who can't afford to drill that well, the most economic thing for some of us and for me was to go drill vertical wells, because I can drill vertical wells and I can still get 350,000 barrels, but some companies are not drilling vertical wells anymore unless they're like monitoring wells. They only drill horizontal wells, EUG being one of those. They don't drill any vertical conventional production. They're going to be a production company horizontally driven, but for others, all of those mudlog shows are an opportunity. But you just have to be careful when you drill through the Woodbine and get your casing set first and then drill out of it, and away you go. You can do a conventional vertical well, do a frac, do a little bit of pelletized acid or some of these new diverter techniques, and be able to stimulate the whole thing. And think about it, the EUG, you're drilling a horizontal Buda well. If you have any kind of misfortune, you're pushing that $6.5, $7, $8 million range, maybe more. If you drill a vertical well, I can drill down to the top of the Buda, and Energy Exploration Partners drilled down the top of the Buda in 5 days. And they drilled out. I mean, they were about 14-day wells. And vertical wells, I'm probably into it for $1.2 million, and then another 800,000 in a frac, so I'm about maybe 2 million in, and I'm going to get 350 to 500,000 barrels out of it. Vertical play looks pretty sexy to me. Horizontal play, again, it's got a lot of issues and things. So I just highlighted all the potential shows here to give you an idea. So and just conclusion, because I talked so long at lunch, I want to just give you guys an idea. These plays come and go, and you tend to beat them to death, and we seem to be married to them in some cases, and we try to back up and take a look at what's going on. And the three things we learned from the geochemistry are important. Immature, shallow zone, you see that going on, there's something going on below you. Middle section is kind of the main phase of oil, the lower section goes all the way into gas, and you see that distinct kick. That's an issue. That's something that's really important to understand. So when you have that maturity, then you have heat and pressure to go along with it, and they're all related. And that creates drilling hazards, right? So sometimes you have to avoid the formation you're after, come at it indirectly and make something out of it. And that's what was done here. Significant drilling issues if you're not careful. Solution, look for part of this is the same thing landing an Eagle Ford well or an Austin Chalk well. Look for the section that you think is going to make the most competent wellbore. We drilled a well in the porosity zone in the Eagle Ford and the next one in the tight zone on the same lease as offsets, fracked in the same time, same frack. The tight well that we drilled took a little longer to drill it, produces better than the porosity one. The frack tunnels stay open longer. You're also going to think about choke management, all the other things that are going on out there, but when you look at these things, it's got to be wellbore stability. Other than that, you have to get away from plugs. You've got to go to something besides plug and perf, because if your pipe moves after completion, when you're pumping 3,000 pounds, probably 20 million, 30 million pounds, what's the biggest one now, 5,000 pounds per foot? 50 million pounds of sand. You've just created a bed that pipe lays in, and if it moves at all, it's history. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I have a little questions.